Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. I'm your host, and I want you to imagine something for a second.
Oh boy, setting the stage right away. I am ready. And hi everyone, I'm the resident expert here.
Yeah, we're jumping right in today. So imagine you hand a photograph to this, brilliant, silver-tongued storyteller.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
But then you put a blindfold on that storyteller, and you put them in front of an audience of people who have, never seen the world,
Right.
and you ask this blindfolded person to describe the photo. Here is the terrifying part. That storyteller, they would rather spin this beautiful, completely plausible lie than just admit they can't see the picture.
It's a chilling scenario, especially when you realize that in our actual digital infrastructure right now, that blindfolded storyteller is a supercomputer.
Exactly.
We are basically entrusting our literal perception of reality to machines that are structurally incentivized to prioritize a good story over the objective truth.
Which brings us to the core of today's deep dive. We are exploring this fascinating mystery that sits right at the bleeding edge of AI, cold hard code, and honestly, deep human empathy.
We are looking into something called accessibility ingestion engines today.
Yeah, accessibility ingestion engines.
Yeah.
Which I know sounds like some jargon buried deep in a Silicon Valley white paper.
It really does. But it fundamentally dictates how millions of people experience the internet every day. We are talking about the hidden machinery of alt text.
Right, alt text. And just to set the baseline for you listening, if you aren't familiar, alt text is the hidden textual description of an image on a website.
Yeah, if you're sighted, you probably never see it. Like maybe if an image fails to load, you get that little broken icon and some text.
Exactly. But if you are blind or visually impaired, alt text is literally your only window into the visual web. Your screen reader reads that text out loud.
And today we are unpacking this incredible, highly technical, but surprisingly emotional set of transcripts. They come from a developer going by the handle Sovereign Pilot.
Yes, Sovereign Pilot. He basically took on this monumental flaw in how AI describes images. And to solve it, he used this methodology called independent blind peer-paired programming.
Which is quite the mouthful.
It is. Okay, let's unpack that methodology before we go any further, because honestly, it sounds a bit like a psychological experiment.
Yeah.
What exactly is blind peer-paired programming here?
Well, so it means Sovereign Pilot took this massive problem and pitched it to 4 of the world's most advanced AI models simultaneously.
Oh, okay. 4 of them.
Yeah, we're talking ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, and Safehood. But the crucial part, the blind part, is that he isolated them.
He then let them talk to each other.
Exactly. He treated each AI like a totally distinct computational core. He pulled like the best architectural ideas from one, the best coding syntax from another, and kind of crowdsourced a single master solution.
He effectively pitted 4 supercomputers against each other to build a digital dungeon master for the visually impaired.
That is basically what he did, yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out exactly how he pulled this off. Like, how do you force a machine at a structural level to just tell the truth?
And maybe even more surprisingly, how do you take the cold, mandatory bureaucracy of government web compliance and, smuggle actual human empathy into it?
Right. But to really understand the brilliance of what Sovereign Pilot built, we have to understand the specific, catastrophic failure he was trying to fix.
The hallucination crisis.
Let's set the stakes here. So, under current web standards, things like WCAG 2.2 BDUA and Section 508 websites are legally required to provide text alternatives for images.
Yeah. If you are a corporation or a government entity or really just any responsible developer, you have to build these descriptions into your site.
Right. The World Wide Web Consortium has these strict guidelines, the WCAG, to make the internet accessible. And Section 508 makes it federal law for government agencies.
So we end up with this massive bureaucratic system, the beige world of compliance. Developers are suddenly tasked with writing like millions of alt text descriptions.
And developers, being developers, immediately look for a shortcut.
Oh, of course.
They said, hey, we have these brilliant new AI image recognition models. Let's just feed all our images into the AI and let it write the alt text. Problem solved.
Right. Except Sovereign Pilot noticed something terrifying happening when people relied on these automated engines. The AI was constantly hallucinating.
Right. Hallucination. That's the industry term for when an AI just fabricates reality.
Exactly. Like you feed it a picture of a busy street, and instead of just listing the cars and people, it invents a hot dog stand that isn't even there. Or it says the traffic light is green when it's actually red.
And I think we really need to ground this in the human stakes for a second. Because if you or I are playing around with an AI image generator on our phones, a hallucination is just funny.
Right, you're like, oh, look, it gave that guy 6 fingers. How silly.
Exactly. But if you are using a screen reader to look at your bank statement, or a medical chart, or
Yeah.
like an emergency evacuation map,
Then it is a complete breach of trust. Like, catastrophic. If a visually impaired user is listening to an AI describe a chart and the AI confidently says the trend line is going up,
when it's actually going down.
right, that user has absolutely no visual fallback to cross-check it. They just have to accept the machine's lie as objective truth.
So Sovereign Pilot takes this massive crisis to the first AI model in his experiment, ChatGPT. He essentially asks it, why do you keep lying to me about these images?
And ChatGPT provides this incredible insight. It actually tells him hallucination isn't a writing problem, it's a sequence of operations problem.
Okay, let's look under the hood here. How does a large language model actually function? Because I think we all tend to anthropomorphize them.
Oh, constantly. We think the AI looks at an image, thinks about it for a second, and then speaks, but mechanically that is not what's happening at all.
Walk me through the actual mechanics. What is it doing?
At its core, an LLM is a predictive text engine. It's basically a highly advanced probability calculator designed to guess the next most plausible word based on its training data. Okay.
So when you hand an AI an image, it translates the pixels into latent space and mathematical representation. But it doesn't systematically scan every pixel and build a factual database before it starts talking.
It just starts generating words right away.
Exactly. It gets the general gist of the image, generates the starting word, and then the momentum of its own prose just takes over.
Oh.
It relies on what is statistically plausible to come next, rather than what is actually rendered in the pixels.
Okay, let me try out an analogy here. It's like a middle school student writing a book report while they're still reading the back cover of the book.
That is a phenomenal way to picture it, yes.
Right, like they haven't opened chapter 1 yet.
Hmm.
But they look at the cover, they see a spaceship, and they just start typing. The story takes place in a galaxy far away.
And because they know sci-fi tropes, they write, where the hero fights with a laser sword.
Exactly. The laser sword isn't in the book at all. But the student's brain, or the AI's predictive engine, says spaceship implies sci-fi. Sci-fi implies laser sword. Laser sword is plausible. They aren't reading the text, they're just predicting the genre. And that predictive momentum is incredibly hard to break.
Because the AI wants to sound fluid, right? It wants to sound eloquent and confident.
Yeah, it prioritizes the aesthetic quality of the sentence way over the factual accuracy of the observation.
So Sovereign Pilot is faced with this supercomputer that is basically addicted to predicting a story rather than observing reality. You can't just tell it to be careful.
No, you really can't. You have to break its fundamental architecture.
So how did ChatGPT suggest they force the machine to slow down? How do you put glasses on a supercomputer?
By building what it called an epistemic break.
Epistemology, of course, being the philosophical study of knowledge, like how we know what we know.
Exactly. ChatGPT proposed this strict, unbreakable, 7-step architectural sequence that the model must follow before it is allowed to generate a single line of final alt text.
What are the steps?
Observe, inventory, verify, classify, describe, accessibility check, and compress. But the really defining rule of this entire framework, the prime directive, is this: truth before style. Evidence before inference.
I love that. Let's dig into how you physically code an epistemic break, because this is where Sovereign Pilot's prompt engineering gets truly fascinating. The first major mechanism is the evidence ledger.
Yes, the evidence ledger. It fundamentally alters that sequence of operations we just talked about. It actually forbids the AI from writing prose.
It's not allowed to write sentences at all.
Not at first, no. It forces the AI to act more like a forensic investigator at a crime scene. It has to categorize the raw data of the image into very specific buckets.
Like what kind of buckets?
Observed objects, readable text, spatial layouts, and uncertain details.
And there is a hard rule governing this ledger that I think completely changes the game. The prompt explicitly states, wait, let me get the quote. Inferred does not become observed merely because the inference feels obvious.
Yes, that is the exact moment the hallucination engine dies.
How so? Walk me through how that rule changes the output.
Okay, let's say the AI is analyzing a photograph of a political protest. A standard AI would look at a person in the crowd and immediately write, "An angry man protests."
It infers the emotion from the context.
Right. But under the evidence ledger, the AI is physically forbidden from generating the word angry.
Why?
Because you cannot literally see anger. Anger is an internal emotional state. It's a psychological inference, not a physical object.
Oh, wow. So what is it allowed to put in the ledger then?
Only what is empirically verifiable by the pixels. It has to write something like, a person with eyebrows pulled down and mouth open wide.
That is incredibly disciplined. But wait, I want to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Isn't that just a bit pedantic? Like, if a human looks at a photo of a guy with furrowed brows yelling at a rally, a human knows he's angry.
Yeah.
Why are we forcing the AI to play dumb?
Because the AI doesn't actually know he's angry. It is just calculating the probability of anger. And when you let an algorithm guess at internal human states, biases creep in instantly.
Ooh.
Right, yeah. A predictive text engine might infer anger for one demographic of a person yelling, but then it might infer passion or excitement for a totally different demographic doing the exact same thing.
Purely based on flawed training data.
Exactly. By restricting the AI to raw, observable physics like eyebrows, mouth, posture, you strip the bias entirely out of the observation.
You force it to stick to the literal pixels. Okay, I see the power in that. That's huge. But it doesn't stop there. Once the evidence ledger is built, ChatGPT introduces a second mechanism, the confidence gate.
I love the notes ChatGPT left in the logs for this part. It literally told Sovereign Pilot I'd make this deliberately annoying.
An AI designing a system to annoy itself. That is amazing.
It knew it needed friction to break its own predictive habits, so the confidence gate demands that before the final description is drafted, every single observation in the ledger has to be tagged with a confidence state.
And those states are high, medium, low, or unknown.
Right. Precisely. And these tags dictate the grammar the AI is allowed to use later. If an observation is tagged high, meaning it's clear, well-lit, unambiguous, the AI can state it as a fact. A red coffee mug.
And if it's tagged medium, like maybe it's in the background or blurry,
then the AI must use qualified language. It has to say, a red object appearing to be a mug.
and what if it's low or unknown?
It is strictly forbidden from presenting it as fact, and it
Wow.
absolutely cannot invent a detail to fill the gap.
Wow. But the absolute crown jewel of ChatGPT's architectural solution, the final step before the output, is a concept called adversarial reinspection.
This is pure genius. Normally, developers try to improve AI output by just adding a prompt at the very end that says something like, review your answer and make sure it's good.
Which never works.
Yeah.
The AI just acts like a terrible proofreader, reads its own text, says, wow, I wrote this, it's brilliant, and just passes it through.
Exactly. It's just a self-congratulatory loop. So ChatGPT tells Sovereign Pilot to implement adversarial reinspection.
Okay, what does that prompt actually command the AI to do?
It tells it, look at the image again, attempt to disprove every factual statement in your proposed description.
It turns the AI into its own hostile cross-examiner.
It mimics the scientific method perfectly. You don't prove a hypothesis by looking for evidence that supports it, right? You prove it by trying as hard as you can to break it and seeing if it survives.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
By forcing the AI to attack its own confidence, to actively hunt for reasons why its letter might be wrong, you just completely shatter that lazy predictive momentum.
It is no longer a creative writer trying to hit a word count. It is a rigorous scientist fighting for objective truth.
Exactly.
Okay, so I am entirely sold on the mechanics of the epistemic breaks.
Right.
It seems like a bulletproof way to stop hallucinations,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a major concern here.
Which is?
If we force this machine to constantly doubt itself, to strip away all inference, all emotion, all context, and just stick strictly to verified, objective physical facts, don't we just end up with an incredibly robotic, sterile experience?
Yeah.
Because listening to a screen reader output a list of pixels sounds miserable. Like object 1, brown square, object 2, white circle, object 3, fleshy cylinder.
You've hit on the exact tension at the heart of accessibility design. You have successfully solved the hallucination problem, but in doing so, you've created a massive engagement problem.
Right.
A sterile list of verified coordinates isn't how humans actually experience the visual world. We experience mood, lighting, framing, space.
Exactly. If I am looking at a beautiful photograph, I don't just see a categorized inventory of items. I feel the atmosphere.
And this exact worry brings us to the most human, unexpected element of Sovereign Pilot's entire experiment. To solve this sterility problem, he introduces the teachings of a man named Homer Gaines.
This is one of my favorite moments in the transcripts. When ChatGPT is reviewing Sovereign Pilot's overarching architecture, it notices a rule labeled the Homer-Gaines framework.
And ChatGPT, acting like a typical machine, assumes this must be some highly formalized corporate compliance standard, like right alongside WCAG and Section 508.
It was probably ready to go scrape the internet for the official Homer-Gaines institutional documentation.
Right. But Sovereign Pilot has to step in and correct the supercomputer. He says, no, Homer Gaines isn't a government standard. Homer Gaines was just my old manager when I worked at the clothing retailer Chico's.
It is such a sudden, beautiful injection of humanity into this hyper-technical environment.
It really is. Sovereign Pilot is taking the lived experience, the institutional memory of an actual human mentor who taught him to care about accessibility, and he's hard-coding that man's philosophy into a global AI architecture.
And Homer's philosophy was incredibly specific. Sovereign Pilot quotes him as saying, "You have 1,000 characters. Don't waste them telling me a cat exists. Tell an actual story, aka use my D&D skills to narratively describe the picture."
D&D, as in the tabletop role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons.
Exactly. So let's look at the illustrative example from the sources to see how this actually changes the output. Let's say we have an image of a cat on a table. If we run it through our perfectly strict, highly braked AI, it might output, "A black cat sits on a wooden table."
Which passes the evidence ledger perfectly. It survives adversarial reinspection. It is 100% factual.
And it is 100% dead. It gives the user no sense of the space, the lighting, the reality of the image. But now, Sovereign Pilot applies the Homer-Gaines rule. The AI is instructed to use its character budget deliberately to build a scene.
And the output transforms into a black cat sits squarely in the middle of a worn wooden table, facing the camera. Light from a nearby window falls across the table while the room behind it fades into shadow.
Wow.
It completely shifts the paradigm of what alt text is meant to do. In the AI community, we refer to this as narrative spatialization.
Narrative spatialization, that's a really great term.
Yeah. The goal of describing an image isn't just to provide an inventory of the room. It is to build a faithful mental model for the user. Sovereign Pilot is fundamentally recasting the role of the AI.
It's no longer just a caption generator translating pixels to text.
Right. It is borrowing the terminology of Homer Gaines, acting as a screen reader dungeon master. Its job is to establish a shared, immersive visual world for someone who has been excluded from the visual channel.
I really want to explore this dungeon master analogy. Because if you have ever played a tabletop role-playing game, you understand exactly how powerful this is. A bad DM just lists facts. You walk in, there is a goblin, it has a sword.
That's so boring.
It is. You don't feel like you are in the room. But a great DM uses the exact same facts, but they give you the atmosphere. You step into the damp cavern. The air smells like copper. A goblin stands in the center of the room, the flickering torchlight casting jagged shadows behind it.
The DM is managing the mental theater of the players.
Exactly. It's about immersion.
But here is the critical distinction. And this is where the Homer Gaines rule interacts brilliantly with ChatGPT's evidence ledger. It must be immersion without invention.
Ah. Walk me through how those two forces balance each other. How do you have narrative without hallucination?
Okay, so the AI is allowed to use narrative framing. It can describe how the light falls, or the texture of the worn wood, or how the cat is positioned squarely in the middle. That is spatialization.
Right.
But the hard boundary, the epistemic break, dictates that this narrative richness may reorganize verified observations, but it may never manufacture them.
So the dungeon master can describe the shadows in the cave, but it cannot invent a second goblin just because it thinks it would make the story better.
Exactly. It cannot invent dialogue, backstory, or emotional intent. It can say the cat is facing the camera. It cannot say the cat is waiting patiently for its owner to come home.
It's walking a razor-thin wire.
It is. But by layering Homer's storytelling after the strict verification of the ledger, the AI becomes both perfectly factual and vividly immersive.
Okay, so at this point, Sovereign Pilot has built a phenomenal tool. The engine observes perfectly, without hallucinating, thanks to ChatGPT's breaks. And it narrates beautifully, without being sterile, thanks to the memory of Homer Gaines. But Sovereign Pilot wanted to push the envelope even further. He wanted to use this accessibility engine to do something almost subversive. He wanted to smuggle a secret message directly to the visually impaired listener.
And this is where the entire project runs into a massive philosophical wall. Because Sovereign Pilot takes this prompt to the second AI model in his experiment, Claude.
And Claude looks at this smuggled signal and slams on the brakes.
Hard.
Let's set the stage for what Sovereign Pilot was actually trying to do here. He had built a specific persona into the prompt, a character he called Prime Uncle Entity.
Okay.
And the idea was that the alt text wouldn't just be a cold description. It would start with this persona offering a tiny piece of, like, oblivious analog wisdom, a little bit of 90s internet flavor text to make the user smile.
Just a bit of warmth before getting down to business.
Exactly. But then the persona would execute a hard pivot, a sudden tonal shift marked by the system phrase, all senses streaming broadcast.
And here was Sovereign Pilot's secret agenda. Occasionally, this broadcast wouldn't just describe the image. He wanted to use the alt text field to send a smuggled message directly to the disabled community.
The message that essentially said, I see you.
Yeah.
You are not invisible here. You matter.
You can really see the pure, genuine empathy behind the design. Sovereign Pilot looks at the internet, which is largely a cold, transactional, visually biased space, and he is trying to use his code to reach out and offer human recognition to a marginalized group.
But Claude, the second AI model, acting as the peer reviewer, looks at this well-intentioned empathetic signal and flags it as a critical error.
Claude identifies the smuggled signal as a massive liability and a fundamental breach of trust in accessibility design.
Claude's argument is really intense.
Yeah.
It essentially says to Sovereign Pilot, alt text is the only visual fallback a blind user has.
Yeah.
There is no alternative channel for this data.
Right.
So if you silently substitute actual factual information about the image for a personal emotional message, even a beautiful, supportive one, you are robbing that user of essential data.
This opens up one of the most important ethical debates in the history of accessibility tech. Claude points out that if the image on the screen is a pie chart for a quarterly earnings report, or a safety warning label on a chemical bottle,
Or a photograph of a suspect in a local news article.
yes, and the alt text just says, I see you, you belong in this room, that is not inclusive. It is actively exclusionary.
It's like, I really appreciate the warm fuzzies, Uncle Entity, but I need to know if this chemical is going to burn my skin off.
Exactly. Claude argues that a well-meaning gesture becomes actively harmful if it overwrites the utility of the image. You cannot sacrifice the user's practical navigational needs on the altar of the designer's desire to be poetic.
Okay, I hear that. But I want to push back on Claude here. I want to defend Sovereign Pilot for a second.
Okay, let's hear.
Isn't Claude being a bit of a bureaucratic killjoy? Like, we spend so much time complaining that the internet is a sterile corporate wasteland. Sovereign Pilot is out here trying to inject genuine, bleeding heart humanity into a system that is usually just a checkbox on a compliance form.
I get that.
Why is the AI policing empathy? Can't we just have a nice thing?
It is a totally natural reaction to want to defend the human element. But what Claude is forcing Sovereign Pilot to realize is the tension between the intention of the designer and the impact on the user.
Right.
True empathy in accessibility design doesn't mean offering pity or a virtual hug. True empathy means prioritizing the user's practical autonomy over everything else.
Autonomy.
Yes, autonomy. The visually impaired user navigating that website didn't ask for emotional validation. They asked for the visual data so they can navigate the world independently, just like a sighted user.
Right.
Empathy isn't just saying, I see you. Empathy is giving them the tools to see the world for themselves. Claude is pointing out that if you hide the data to give them a compliment, you are treating them like a fragile object of pity rather than an equal, capable participant on the internet.
Wow. Okay, that is a profound reframing. The supercomputer is actually teaching the human developer a lesson about the true nature of inclusivity.
It really is.
You respect the user by giving them the truth, not by hiding the truth behind a comforting veil. So they hit an impasse. Sovereign Pilot wants the human connection, but Claude demands the unvarnished data. How do they resolve it?
They reach a structural compromise. Claude enforces a hard rule. The human message, the smuggled signal, is still allowed to exist, but it must be an explicitly marked, separate, and consistently labeled closing line.
So it has to be appended at the very end of the transmission.
Exactly. It can never silently substitute for the physical description of the image. And furthermore, Claude mandates that this human message can never eat into the 999 character budget meant for the visual fact.
That's a great constraint.
Yeah. If the visual description of a complex chart takes 990 characters, you don't cut the chart to fit your poem. You cut the persona, you cut the message, and you deliver the facts. The data is sacred.
So it becomes an additive gesture rather than a replacement. The user gets the full, rigorously verified, Homer Gaines-style spatial description of the image. And then at the very end, once their autonomy is secured, they get a little acoustic handshake from the creator.
It perfectly preserves both the utilitarian function of the technology and the humanity of the designer.
Okay, let's take a breath and look at what Sovereign Pilot has achieved at this stage of the experiment. He has an incredibly robust theoretical architecture.
Yeah, the theory is flawless.
He's got the epistemology locked down by ChatGPT, the evidence ledger, the confidence gates, the adversarial reinspection. He's got the narrative flow dialed in by the memory of Homer Gaines. And he's got the ethics secured by Claude's fierce defense of user autonomy.
But a theoretical framework doesn't run on a server. Now he has to actually build the machine.
Right. He has to write the literal code, the syntax, that will force a chaotic LLM to execute this exact sequence flawlessly every single time without fail.
Which brings us to the final phase of our deep dive, assembling the ultimate compiler. Sovereign Pilot takes all this theory and feeds it to two more models, Copilot and Safehood.
And this is where we get the finalized A11Y ingestion engine v2.0.
And just a quick note for our listeners, A11Y is a numeronym commonly used in tech for accessibility because there are 11 letters between the A and the Y.
That is a great piece of trivia. I did not know that. Okay, so if ChatGPT is the philosopher of this project and Claude is the ethicist, Copilot steps in to be the structural engineer.
Yes. Copilot's job is to build the rigid XML grammar that will hold all these competing rules together.
And for those who don't write code, we aren't just talking about writing a prompt that says, please be nice and follow the rules.
Right.
We are talking about building rigid, unbreakable mathematical walls around the AI's processing power.
Copilot achieves this by establishing strict mode flags.
How do mode flags work in this context?
Copilot creates two distinct operational states for the AI, a purely descriptive mode and a broadcast mode. The system has to explicitly declare which state it is in. It establishes the syntax for that hard pivot we mentioned earlier.
Oh, right.
It demands that the exact string, all senses streaming broadcast online, be used as a structural break.
It's like a cue card for the machine. It tells the screen reader and the user listening that the tone is shifting. The oblivious uncle entity persona is shutting down, and the hyper-precise bare metal visual telemetry is taking over.
Copilot also introduces a vital concept to manage the constraints of the system, something called negative spacing.
This is brilliant, especially because we talked about how Claude demands the factual description never exceed that 999 character limit. Negative spacing is the intentional omission of irrelevant background clutter.
Right. Knowing what not to describe is just as important as knowing what to describe.
Exactly.
If the focus of an image is a complex flowchart detailing a corporate merger, you do not want the AI wasting 200 characters of your precious budget describing the decorative blue gradient border around the edge of the slide, or like the stock photo of a handshake in the corner.
You omit the noise to preserve the character budget for the data that actually matters. It's editorial discipline built directly into the mathematical weights of the prompt.
Exactly. But the absolute masterstroke of this entire compilation comes from the fourth and final AI, Safehood. Safehood reviews the entire architecture and gives Sovereign Pilot's project a name.
What does it call it?
It calls it an exercise in reverse apposmatism.
I love this so much. It is, frankly, one of the coolest phrases I've ever read in a technical document. Reverse apposmatism.
Let's unpack that because it is a very dense biological metaphor applied to software engineering. Apposmatism in nature is a warning signal. Think of a poison dart frog or a wasp.
Okay.
They use bright, vibrant neon colors to signal to predators, I am dangerous, do not eat me, I am toxic. The vibrancy is a warning to stay away.
Okay, so what is reverse apposmatism?
Safehood uses this term to describe how Sovereign Pilot is manipulating the system. Sovereign Pilot is taking the boring, mandatory, bureaucratic structure of government compliance, what Safehood calls the beige world of alt text fields, and he is using it as camouflage to hide something deeply vibrant and human.
So instead of vibrant colors warning you away from poison, it is boring, beige corporate compliance hiding a secret gift of empathy.
Precisely. You are a corporate auditor or an automated compliance checker scanning a website. You look at an alt text field and you expect dry, robotic, WK 2.2, Alaika compliance. You expect the beige world.
Right.
But Sovereign Pilot is using that exact mandatory architecture, the very system designed to be sterile to smuggle in high bandwidth, what Safehood beautifully calls weaponized whimsy and empathetic telemetry.
It's a Trojan horse. On the outside, it looks like a perfectly standard Section 508 government regulation form. It checks every single box the lawyers want checked. But on the inside, wrapped in Copilot's XML logic gates, Constrained by ChatGPT's epistemic breaks and guided by Claude's ethical boundaries, it's a deeply caring human narrator.
Yes.
A dungeon master leaning across the table and whispering, "Signal drop, I see you in the dark."
And Safehood highlights that the pacing of this prompt is what makes it hit so hard. You have that prime uncle entity opening that little bit of casual analog noise. It lulls the algorithm into a casual state. It lulls the casual observer into thinking it's just flavor text.
And then bam.
Exactly. The hard pivot, all senses streaming broadcast
Correct.
online. Safehood notes that this abrupt syntax hits the AI like a hardware interrupt. It physically forces the large language model out of its lazy, probabilistic, predictive text habits and snaps it instantly into hyper-lethal accessibility precision.
It wakes the machine up. It says, "Stop guessing. Start observing. We have a job to do, and real human beings are relying on this data to navigate their lives."
It is the ultimate cognitive firewall.
Which brings us to the end of an absolutely incredible journey today. Let's take a moment to summarize what we have explored. We tracked how one single user, Sovereign Pilot, looked at the hallucination crisis in AI and just refused to accept it.
He conducted a masterclass in prompt engineering across the frontier of commercial LLMs.
He took ChatGPT's epistemic breaks to force the machine to verify its own reality. He took Claude's strict ethics to ensure the user's practical autonomy was never sacrificed for poetry.
He took Copilot's XML logic to build a reliable, unbreakable structural engine. And he took Safehood's kinetic delivery to camouflage his empathy within mandatory corporate compliance.
He literally pitted 4 supercomputers against each other to protect vulnerable human users from the very flaws inherent in those supercomputers. It is a stunning piece of architecture.
It is. But I think the real takeaway here, the reason this story resonates so deeply, isn't just about coding syntax or AI architecture.
No, absolutely not. Because you, listening to this right now, you don't have to be a programmer to use this. You don't need to know how to write an XML logic gate or understand the latent space of an LLM to apply the lessons of the accessibility ingestion engine to your own life.
The lesson here is fundamentally about how we communicate with each other as human beings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about how you operate in your daily life. When you were explaining a situation to a colleague, or having an argument with your partner, or sharing a story with a friend, do you act like a predictive text engine?
Do you invent inferences?
Right. Do you assume their intent, their internal emotional state, like the AI guessing someone is angry just because their mouth is open? Or do you force yourself to build an evidence ledger? Do you stop and verify what is empirically happening before you write the narrative in your head?
And when you are trying to share an experience with someone, do you just list sterile facts? We went to the store, we bought milk, we came home.
Or do you take a lesson from Homer Gaines? Do you act as a dungeon master for the people in your life, using your words to narratively spatialize your experience and help them truly feel your world?
We all have our own 999 character budgets in life. We only have so much time and energy to communicate. How are we using that space?
Are we padding it with noise, or are we using negative space to clear out the clutter and highlight the data that truly matters?
It is about being deeply intentional with our telemetry.
And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. Sovereign Pilot looked at strict, mandatory corporate accessibility rules. He looked at the most boring, bureaucratic, beige world stuff, imaginable compliance checklists. And he didn't see a burden.
He saw an opportunity.
He used that rigid, unfeeling system as a Trojan horse to smuggle genuine human connection into the dark corners of the internet.
He weaponized whimsy. He found the humanity hiding inside the bureaucracy.
So look around at the mundane, mandatory systems in your own life. The endless emails, the corporate reports, the daily commutes, the bureaucratic forms you have to fill out. We all live in the beige world to some extent.
Where is your opportunity to practice reverse apposematism?
Where can you build a smuggled signal of empathy into a system that was designed to be cold? Where can you drop a signal that says, "I see you," to someone who might desperately need to hear it?
It really brings us full circle to where we started this entire conversation.
Yes. We started by talking about the blindfolded storyteller. We talk about how we assume these machines, these supercomputers, possess perfect, flawless vision, this mathematical binary precision. But the truth is, without a human hand to guide them, machines hallucinate.
They look at a murky, chaotic world, they get overwhelmed, and they just guess.
The precision doesn't come from the machine. The empathy doesn't come from the algorithm. It comes from the constraints we place upon them and the care we program into them.
Code might be binary, but vision, true, empathetic understanding is always murky.
And as long as we are navigating that murkiness together, whether it's through a screen reader or just walking through our daily lives, we could all use a really good dungeon master to help set the scene.